Hey, morning everybody, it's Nick. More on the reclaiming myself, and today is about yoga and reclaiming myself. So one of the things I started doing very early in my menopause journey was yoga, because I found it really helpful in terms of the joints, aches and pains, and also really helpful in terms of my energy levels. So for me, and I'm sure lots of people, we see our energy levels just, dip through the floor. And when I went into the menopause, I was very high impact sports. So, I would play squash a lot, I would swim a lot, I would run a lot, really high impact. And so, excuse the dogs in the background, it was quite hard going. And I got to the stage where, despite being fit in those aspects, having played squash since I was 12, my body was just really struggling, and I had a terribly bad back and joints, which I think we often feel as the estrogen drops. And so I actually was seeing an osteopath, and it was, I don't know, 60 odd quid a time, but it kind of felt like it was after the fact. So I thought, I wonder whether I could spend that money and be more proactive. And what I did was I found a yoga teacher who did one-to-ones, and we just focused on yoga to help my back, and it really worked, and my backache pretty much disappeared, and it felt like I was doing something proactive. Now, I've been a little bit in and out of yoga over the years, mainly because my teachers keep moving, and I don't really like westernized kind of, I don't know how to explain it, but I don't like going to the yoga classes where it's a bit wham bam, thank you man. It's a bit westernized in terms of it's fast and furious, or hot yoga, and it's about getting into really difficult positions and you need to be really fit and all kinds of things. I wanted, and have always wanted, to stay very much with what I would call authentic yoga. So at the minute, I am experimenting, but today is my 7th class for something. I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I'll do my best. It's gitananda yoga. I will put a link to the website in my comments. And it's a very authentic type of yoga that focuses primarily on breath and then movement, and is all about the energy chakras and movements in our body. I'm just at the very start, but what I would say is this morning I have my yoga lesson. It is 90 minutes. It is not too, sometimes it's physically demanding, but it's much more about, it's really hard to explain actually. It's much more about breathing techniques and very controlled movements and very specific movements in terms of trying to understand our body. And I looked back to when I started this form of yoga, which was a little bit fated. Are there really any coincidences in life? Who knows? I went to a sound bath because I really like sound baths and I find them really therapeutic, and I've definitely really embraced that as part of my journey, particularly with the sensory overload and the anxiety and so forth. I found the sound baths, sorry, excuse me, Panda. Honestly, they're barking at a leaf dropping. I found them really therapeutic, but there was one sound bath I went to in particular, and I liked the energy of the teacher very much. And I looked at her website and found that she did this type of yoga and thought, you know what, I'm just going to give it a go. When I look back, after the first week of doing this yoga, after not walking for months, that was the week I went for my first power walk in months. Now, maybe that was always going to be, I don't know, and I can't quite explain how it happens, but it's really interesting joining those dots that after the first session of this type of yoga, which really you got to the end of the 90 minutes and you kind of thought, have I done anything? The next day I got up and went out for quite a long power walk. So why am I sharing this? Well, reclaiming parts of me. And this, I think, is very much about the aches and pains and the mindfulness and the opening up to learning new techniques, new, more natural techniques, definitely, such as the breath and the meditation that's part of this yoga too, in order to be able to give my brain a rest. So the thing that's coming out of the menopause research is that we are getting brain fatigue when we're perimenopausal until we get to the other side. And because there's just so much that goes on in our lives all the time, there's always a to-do list, isn't there? There's always something we're worrying about, somewhere we're meant to be, something we're thinking about. And as an aside, I remember a few months ago going to see a hearing specialist because the sensory overload was really bad. And everybody else gets that. Just, I'm so overwhelmed if more than one person talks to me, or if there's background noise, or if it's too noisy or too busy. And it manifests itself in a very, very deep anxiety, and just, I just have to get out of the situation, and I can't think and I can't hear, and I'm just, anyway, they wanted to check my hearing. Actually, my hearing, if anything, is too sensitive, and the hearing specialist said that he's observing a number of menopausal women coming to him with hearing problems, and actually their hearing is perfect, and this sensory overload is very, very prevalent, and is almost it's a bit of a, it's really showing up in a lot of menopausal women. And he says, although there are nerve blockers that the doctors can prescribe, it's not really, he didn't advise it for me because it also then blocks some of the nerves you don't want to block. And what he actually said to me at the time, he said he really thinks mindfulness is the way forward, and joining the dots, it makes sense, because if our brain is going through a brain exhaustion, which I think is a combination of the biological factors of low estrogen, but also I think the environmental factors of a manic world that's 24/7 with no off button, then we've got this brain fatigue. It makes perfect sense that having quieter, trying to manage quieter environments where we can. He basically said, it's really important to do mindfulness every day if you can. And also he recommended some sleep apps in terms of playing particularly nature music, because although we think we might be sleeping, we're not actually getting to the really deep level of sleep. And the reason we're not is because our nervous systems are stuck in the fight or flight mode. So when we go to sleep, that's when we need to feel our safest. So that's when we need our nervous systems to come right back to the lowest point to allow us to get to a really deep sleep. There are lots of different, I'm slightly going off on one, but there's lots of different titles for this, none of which I can remember, obviously, with my brain fog. But the principle is, when we go to sleep, we have to get into this really deep sleep to really be able to replenish our minds as well as our body. And what's happening is a huge number of people, a massive percentage, I can't remember what it is, but we're just not getting the quality of sleep we need, even though we think we are, which is why when we wake up, we still feel knackered and really exhausted. And it's because the nervous system isn't going into the really deep sleep. So there were two big things he said to do with the sensory overload. One was mindfulness, and secondly was these sleep apps to really help you get into a deep sleep. I'll stop because the dogs are going mad barking at something. But in terms of regaining some calm and peace and learning to manage my own anxiety and busyness, this yoga I think is really helping. So I will keep going with it, and I will let you know how I do. All right, lots of love.